Hi guys, we're going to be making salsa. So here we have our dressing and our tomatoes, our onion, our pepper, and our cilantro. Then we have our utensils, our measuring cup, and a knife, and our bowl. So first we're going to make sure our hands are washed and that our hair is up. Then we're going to put our bowl aside and start cutting our tomatoes. So I already have a half cut. So what you're going to do is you're going to take it and cut it in half again. And then once that's done, you want to cut out the insides because you don't want to eat the wet seeds and stuff. So you can just compost that. After that, you can just take your smaller piece and cut it into small pieces. So I like to think of cutting it in half, then in half again, then in half again until they're in really small pieces. So you just want to keep doing that and keep cutting until the whole half of that tomato is done. So here again, I have smaller pieces and I'm just going to keep cutting till I get even smaller pieces. So we just want to keep cutting until we have our really small pieces, because who wants to eat chunky salsa? I know I don't. Just make sure you have the really small pieces. So here again, we just want to keep cutting. It may take some time. As you can see, we're still only on our first half, but you need 1.5 tomatoes. So you can tell this is going to take some time. But you really want to make sure you have really small pieces, because it's going to matter in the end, because you don't really want to be eating big chunks of tomato when you want to enjoy the other parts of it too. See, as you can see, it's just taking so much time and careful consideration. Now we're on the larger tomato, and this is just a faster clip because I realized how long that was taking me. So just feel free to pause this video and take your time, because you really want to make sure that it's the best quality. See, just taking your time and cutting the tomatoes into really small pieces and not using the insides. Now that's done, you have your big pile of pieces of tomato, and you're going to bring your bowl over. You're going to start putting your tomatoes into the bowl until all of them are gone. Now that our tomatoes are in the bowl, you just want to make sure you get everything. Every little bit of tomato. Now that you have everything, you want to put your bowl aside and wipe down your cutting board, just so it's very clean for the next thing that we need to cut. Just keep wiping it down until it's all clean and dry. And wipe down your hands too if they're a little bit dirty. Now we're going to put that aside and move on to our next thing, our red onions. So we're just going to put it down and take our knife and cut it in half. After you do that, you don't need the other half since we only need a 1/4 cup. So you're just going to take that other half and put it aside. With this half, you want to cut it in half again, and we don't need the other half of that either, so you can save it for something else. Then you want to take your knife and scrape off all the skin from this. You don't want any skin. And as you're cutting, you might run into more edges of skin as you go. You don't want any of the dark purple or red parts. So now that you have that, you want to cut that in half. And onions is a little bit easier to cut because they just spread apart themselves. You just want to keep cutting rows and rows until you have really small pieces. And you want these to be really small so they really take up the flavor of tomato and really just be a whole part of it. And your eyes might get a little bit watery, as you might see me do in a few seconds. And it's okay, take a break as you need, because they do bug my eyes like crazy. So I totally get it. Just make sure you're not crying too much that you're cutting your finger off. So just keep cutting the onions because you want really small pieces. You don't want to just be eating scoops of onions. Just tiny, tiny little pieces. And see, I'm coming across a few pieces of skin while I'm cutting this, which is okay. You just need to remember to compost it. And you'll know it's hard skin that you can't eat when it's not easy to cut and it's very tough and fair and you can't cut into it. You're looking for dark purple and red colors that are skin. Now that our onions are chopped, we just want to take them all and put them into a little pile. And if you come across more things, that's okay. Now we want to bring our bowl back and start putting our onions in the bowl. Make sure to get all of it. Every last little bit. Now that we're done with that, we can put our bowl aside again. And I'm just going to wipe my eyes because they were hurting like crazy. Now putting our bowl aside and getting our next thing. This is our cilantro now. And these are bunches, so they have stems. So you just need to be careful that you're not cutting and using the stems in your salsa. So you just want to open it, and for this part, just guess how many branches you might need for half a cup. I think I'm going to guess about 4, and it will totally matter up to you just how many you think. If you end up with too much or too little, it won't affect the salsa too much. So I'm roughly using 4. And one at a time, you just want to cut the branches off and compost those until you're left with little branches. And you want to do that to all the stems, just cutting off all the stems, putting them aside, and leaving the little leafy branches. See, just getting all the stems from all the branches and composting those. Or if you don't have a compost, just putting it in the garbage. Now we're going to put them all together and put them kind of in a little pile and just keep holding and cutting like lines. You just want to make sure that it's not moving around when you're trying to cut it. So I like to hold part of it and use my other hand with the knife to cut through it. You just want to keep moving it around and cutting through until you have tiny little pieces. They'll start to get a little moistury and wet, which is okay, but you just want to keep cutting through it. And you can see that it will start to get stuck to my fingers, which is totally okay, but you just want to make sure it's left into small little pieces, just like the other things we have been cutting. Now you want to take your measuring cup and make sure that you use just enough cilantro for your thing. If you're left with too much or too less, that's okay. You can see that I have a bit less, but it's not going to affect my salsa too much. Just want to make sure you get every last little bit into the measuring cup. Now that you can see how much cilantro I have, we can bring our bowl back and put it in there. Just getting all of it in there, and even if it's on your fingers, they're clean, so it's safe to use. And just getting all of it in there. And now I'm just going to close the package and put it back in my fridge so we can use it again later. Now putting our bowl to the side, we're going to move on to our jalapeno pepper. So this, we only need half of it. So we're just going to cut it in half, and you can use the other half for how you'd like. Now with this half, you want to cut it in half again and take out all the seeds. It might take a little shaking, but you don't want any of the seeds in your salsa. Now that you're left with this, you have two halves, and you just want to keep cutting them into small pieces just like the rest. Just make sure that they're really small because it will be a bit spicy if you eat it all at once. Just cutting it into small, tiny pieces. And again, feel free to pause the video and take the time if you need it. Just tiny little pieces. Last little piece to cut. And now we're going to bring our bowl back, and we're just going to put all of our little pieces in there. Just make sure you get everything and put it into the bowl. Now we can put our bowl aside again, and we can move on to our dressing. Now this is the last thing. So we're going to need our quarter cup again, and I'm just going to wipe it to get rid of all the cilantro that might have been left in there. And we're just going to open the cap, and I'm going to use a knife to break the seal. And once I rip it off, I'm going to put that in the garbage. And make sure you shake this before you use it, but I forgot to in this video. Now we're going to fill our 1/4 cup. And closing the cap, and then we're going to bring the bowl back and put that all in. Now with a spoon, we're just going to stir this all up until everything's fully mixed in. You don't want any parts to be watery or any parts not be fully mixed in. So just mix everything and make sure everything is fully evened out and smooth. Just be thorough with it and make sure everything is good. Now just wiping off the spoon and putting that to the side. Thank you for making salsa with us.